Welcome in once again to the Browns Dynasty Review. We started recording this and got cut out, so we got to do it again. Didn't get too far, which is fine. Browns 11-6 made the playoffs. I don't know how to feel about this team. What's the optimism level of the pieces in terms of fantasy for the Browns in Dynasty? Like mid, high, low? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I'd say a higher part of definitely like a middling team, but like kind of on the higher end of it. It's like, obviously like with Chubb getting hurt last year and everything kind of like threw everything for a loop because they are such a run heavy team. But I think we just expect more out of Watson. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of these guys are kind of on maybe not a lot of them, but maybe like the three main ones that like Watson, Chubb, and definitely more Chubb and even Amari Cooper are kind of like on the back half of their careers, but we've all seen them be elite. Like maybe that's a little generous to Amari Cooper, but I mean, he's always been like very, very good to say the least. So yeah, I definitely expect a little more, but I feel like they do tend to surprise as well. So
yeah, they had a good season, one of the better seasons they've had for quite a long time since they, they were the Browns, and then the Browns moved to Baltimore, and then they got the Browns back. So that was like in the mid '90s. So one of their better seasons since the mid '90s for sure.
I remember. I was a big fan of the Drew Carey show growing up, and that's based out of Cleveland. And I remember they had an episode where it's like, oh, we're getting the Browns back. And like they go to the game and stuff. And yeah, it's like a whole thing. But I was like, what the hell is this? Like, because I didn't know anything about football then.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of funny, like where it's like, oh, like I would have never known that, like, like what you just said, like where they went away and then they came back and, or, it was like a new team basically when they came back because the old team, not like the players, but like the actual team, like went away and then it came back. And I remember asking Dad too. I was like, "What's a Brown? Why is that there?" And apparently, it was the owner or something.
Yeah, it was the owner. He was like one of the pioneers of American football in general, and his name was Paul Brown, so he just named it after himself. Yeah, kind of a shitty mascot, to be honest.
Yes. What an egomaniac.
I know, right? Seriously. But yeah, so the Browns 11-6 made the playoffs, got eliminated. Stefanski, I thought he did a really good job. Potential Coach of the Year candidate, in my opinion. At least should get some recognition to be a candidate, considering everything that happened. They're cap. They're over the cap. They're $20 million in the hole, which they're going to be for the next till 2026 through 2026. That's when Deshaun Watson's contract comes off the books. They have some draft picks. They don't have their first round pick. That's still, I believe, Houston's, which is crazy. They have their second and third, but then they don't have a pick to the fifth round. It's always crazy when I write out these picks. I'm just like, I don't ever remember like the Browns and the Panthers making a trade or the Browns and the Eagles making a trade. There's just like they have the Panthers, Eagles, Houston makes sense. Ravens and Falcons picks. I'm just like, I don't remember a trade with any of those teams, but a lot of just stuff happens, during the draft. And free agents, Joe Flacco's the big one. Kareem Hunt is another one at the running back position. And that's about it for the free agents. So that's it for their free agents. So we'll just get started with Deshaun Watson. A big point big talking point. So, we're not focusing too much on the character stuff and what he, is accused of doing and all that. So, although we do have to take that into consideration, like I mentioned before we got cut off in the last video, I tried to make a trade with someone offering Deshaun Watson. They're like, I morally can't take him on my team. So there's people like that, and that's fine. But that does come into the rankings a little bit. But he's listed as QB 19. Obviously, since coming to the Browns, we saw a 6-game stretch where he didn't look good, but he also didn't play for like 2 years, and he was starting in week 12. And then last year, where I just feel like he didn't really get going, he played in 6 games. He actually really only played 5 because he got like knocked out really early in one of them. And I was actually looking it up. And in those 5 games, he averaged 18.5 points per game, which would have been top 10 or 11, I believe, this year if he kept that up. So, it's easy to say he played poorly, which he kind of did from an NFL point of view, but he still runs the ball. So where are we at with Deshaun Watson? Is he a buy at that QB 19 spot?
Yeah, definitely a buy. Like, yeah, I think it's kind of interesting if you look at his, like what you just said about like his per game stats and everything. And like, I don't think he looked bad. Like, he looked better than probably, 30 guys who started last year. Because there were so many backups and everything. Like, I think still Watson still has something to show us, for sure. Like, I don't know if he'll ever get back to those previous highs of quarterback 5, but he definitely has that potential and that ceiling. So, I mean, he's one of the few guys I think that you could probably get for like a couple of second round picks, or even just like a late first at the quarterback position, and actually who has like the ceiling of, a top 5, top 6 quarterback. Like, I don't like, I think a lot of people are kind of like, like they're low on him, which is the perfect opportunity, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's in that range like we talked about. Like, you almost need to rush for at least 4 100 yards in order to be like a QB top 3 quarterback. If you don't do that, it's almost impossible to, unless you're throwing like 50 touchdowns. And he does that. His time in Houston, he did that. If you look at his numbers, 6 games in 2022, 175 yards. That's almost 500 yards in a 17-game season. Last year, 142 yards. That's like 400 yards. So he can do that still, even though he's a little bit older. He'll be close to 29 when the season starts. So, yeah, I agree with you. Like, he's one of those guys you can get pretty cheap that you could finish as a top 5 guy still. You look at who he's around: Baker Mayfield, Will Levis, Kirk Cousins, Bryce Young, Jared Goff. Those guys probably aren't going to be finishing top 5 at least next year, I would say. Goff and Baker and those are solid QB2s and stuff, or high end or low end QB1s, but they don't have that potential that Watson has. So yeah, I generally agree with you there. Hopefully we can get a full season. He's going to have the job because they're just paying him a ridiculous amount of money. So he's going to have the job at least for a couple more years, at least till next year. They're going to give him a full season for sure.
Yeah, and unless he completely flames out, like, I feel like his value can only go up. Given the guys that are in front of him, like outside of like I don't know if he can move up back into that QB 12 territory unless he kind of goes back to what he was before he even went to the Browns. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I definitely think like there's a lot of potential there, like for him to only go up in value. Like, yeah, bye.
Yep. Flacco is a free agent. I don't really know what his value is. Like, I guess you're holding on to him because of what he did. That short, 6 games stretch that he came in, it was just like lighten things up. But he also he had 8 interceptions in 5 games, which is pretty crazy. So you're talking about like over 25 interceptions in a season, which you just can't sustain an offense like that. It worked for the Browns because he was just slinging it, and that's the best they had. But I don't know if anyone's going to bring him in to be like their starting quarterback. Like, I don't know. I don't know if he wants to compete or be a backup either. I think that's kind of what he said when he signed with Cleveland. I don't know. Well, you're definitely holding Flacco for now, right? And see what happens in the free agency.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. There's like a update from Rotoballer from 4 years ago. It's like Flacco intends to play next season. It's like, oh, okay. Like, I guess he wants to, but Yeah, I mean, he was throwing the ball it's literally it was 42 or more times in those 5 games. The only game he didn't throw over 30 was against the Jets, which we kind of know what the situation was there. Like no one threw well against the Jets. Like he just ran the hell out of it, the ball against that defense. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, he's going to be what? Is he going to be 40? I mean, I see him as 39. I guess I could see it on Peak Trade Cut, but I don't know if there's a whole lot of value there. But he's an easy drop candidate once the draft comes around. But you should know a little bit better where he's going to be, kind of a thing, before then.
Would you take anything for him? Like someone offers you a 4th-round pick, you just take it, thinking, I might just get a free 4th.
Yeah, because I mean, he was a free piece anyway. So yeah, anything you can get if someone believes in it or something, But I know we say this all the time, which doesn't really do anyone any good. But maybe it's just more like educational if it's not obvious. But it's like, well, the time to sell him was last year, like while he was playing well. So
yeah,
obviously no DeLorean, so can't do much with that.
People who are winning championships. I mean, our dad won our Dynasty league, and you started Flacco. So
yeah,
it's just crazy that happened. DTR is probably a hold because he's a running quarterback. Didn't look great when he played, but it just also wasn't fair, I guess, to throw. He wasn't ready to play. I guess hold him, see if he's still the QB2. He has some upside because he can run the ball. So, although he didn't really run the ball too, I guess he had 65 yards in 3 games starting. I don't know exactly how much he ran, but he can run the ball. So, I think he's just a hold at this point during the offseason. And I don't want to roster PJ Walker or Jeff Driscoll. So, I'm out on those guys. Nick Chubb's an interesting one. Had a major injury. A nasty looking one. I haven't heard anything about how that's going. It was week 2? It was really early on, but it was a really bad injury. So, man, he's older. What is he? 29, I believe, or going on 30 maybe. Let's see. He is 28.1. Okay, he's a little younger than I thought. So he's just turned 28 recently. So, if he didn't have that injury, you'd still be pretty high on Nick Chubb going into this year for sure. But they have a potential out. Cleveland does, so he might not even be on the roster unless they rework his contract. He has a major injury. Is it just one of those situations like you're not selling him because you probably can't get much for him, and he still could kind of turn out to be something? Is that how we're approaching Nick Chubb?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think that he's going to be the Nick Chubb of old, or of last year, because we are calling him old. He did just, I heard you say this, but yeah, he did just turn 28, right? So that's good.
Yeah.
He's a young 28. But yeah, I think he's actually like a pretty sneaky. If you could probably get him for pretty cheap, and as long as you're not counting on him as your RB2 or anything like that, I think he'll finish a lot stronger than he'll start. It might take him a little bit to get going and stuff, but I mean, we've seen what this dude does on the field. He doesn't need a whole lot to make a lot. And yeah, he got injured very, very early on in the season. So he's had a ton of time. By the time the season starts, he's basically had a year of rehab at that point. So I think that's all kinds of reasons to try and get him on the cheap. I wouldn't overpay for him because, running backs, especially coming back from major injuries can be we don't really see it very often pan out, but he's not going to be as long as you're not buying him for what you would have paid for him, kind of going into last season, which I don't think anyone is. But no. I think he's kind of hit up the Nick Chubb owner and see what you might be able to get him for.
What would you send? Would you send an early third? I wouldn't send any second for him.
No, I don't think so, because I think like that's probably kind of like a more or less like fair value. Um, but like I see Luke Musgrave is like a player that they're saying Keep Trade Cut is saying is actually slightly more valuable than him. It's kind of like, oh, I would do that in a heartbeat, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Jones. I don't know, because maybe not in super flex, but yeah. What about Kendre Miller? Like, he's one.
I'd probably just keep Kendrick, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like,
I think I would too. So that's kind of right around where he is, you know. Running back 28.
yeah, it's just like best case scenario to me. Okay, he's back by the beginning of the year. Doesn't look right till like week 6, and then he's good but not amazing. You know, he's like a top 20 guy. That's like best case, top 15 maybe best case scenario. So I don't want to risk too much for that. You know, so it's unfortunate. And again, he might not even be on the Browns, like, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I don't know, but you know, they are in cap hell a little bit, and you know, he's a potential out candidate. So, and I think they can save a lot of money with him too, because he was like the last big running back contract that was given out. So, yeah, the other running back, Jerome Ford, you know, he was just like Mr. Consistent all year long. Finishes, I think, top RB 19 in standard, RB 17 in half PPR. You just like look at his game log. It was just like super consistent. If you needed 10 to 12 points, he was giving it to you, you know, until the end there. He kind of, you know, the last 4 weeks didn't look so great, but I don't know. I think he's just like a solid low end RB2, high RB3, especially given like Chubb's probably not going to be ready. Even if he is, they're still going to use him, and they don't have a bunch of, you know, high draft picks necessarily to spend on running backs, or they're not going to necessarily bring in a running back and pay a bunch of money. So I kind of like Jerome Ford again, just like a nice little flex play RB2 if I'm like, you know, to start my year at least, so I don't have to, and then I can upgrade as the year goes on, maybe. So where are you at with Jerome Ford?
Yeah, I think we saw what he was last year. Like, we basically had a full season of him as the guy for the Browns. You know, like obviously Kareem Hunt came in and kind of like mixed things up a little bit, but yeah, super consistent, like you said. Like, he's not going to necessarily win you weeks. Like, he doesn't have like that crazy high ceiling. But yeah, I think he's a good enough player for sure. It's like very involved in the passing game, you know? And yeah, I think, like you said, 10 to 12 points, slot him in.
Mm-hmm. Which is good for half PPR. And again, like, how I like to approach the running back position in Dynasty is like, I want to get out of these guys as much as possible. And then, you know, I can worry about my running backs October, November. So he's kind of like that perfect one where it's like, all right, he's my RB2. Like, he gives me 10 points. I'll see how my season goes the first 6 weeks. If I suck, all right, I'm going to start tanking. If I'm doing well, okay, I can look to upgrade my RB2 spot from Jerome Ford. But you know, he's that your team shouldn't be winning or losing like on Jerome Ford, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So he's like a nice little like, all right, let's see how this works out the first 6 weeks and see how my team does type of running back. So Kareem Hunt, I think, is probably done. Didn't really do much when he came back. He's no one wanted to sign him until the Browns. You know, he's still only 28. He'll be 29 to start the year, but I don't know. I think it says a lot that no one really signed him. And Pierre Strong, sorry, hasn't done anything. So just kind of moving on from both those guys, most likely.
You know what's crazy about Kareem Hunt though? It's like he didn't play a ton when they did sign him after the Chubb injury, but when he was on the field, they were giving him the ball. Mm-hmm. So it was almost like a tell. Like, oh,
Yeah.
he's on the field, they're giving it to him, kind of a thing. But yeah, he didn't help himself. Like, he had a good touchdown stretch there, after the bye week. I'm seeing week 6 to 10, one touchdown every week basically, except 2 against Indy. But yeah, like I think like he was very much kind of like, I don't know if a gadget player is quite the right way to say it, but I was actually kind of surprised to see that he scored 9 touchdowns last year, even though he didn't play very much, But so, I mean, they obviously trusted him in that situation, but I don't think there's really value there.
No, yeah, 9 touchdowns is surprising. That's like top 25 in the NFL. If you were to like make a top 25 list,
yeah,
like, all right, fill out the top 25, high scoring touchdowns, excluding quarterbacks. Like, I don't think anyone would guess Kareem Hunt. So, so we'll move on to the receivers. Amari Cooper, one of the more underrated wide receivers, kind of in his entire career. I think he's like, is he the only wide receiver to have 200 yards with 3 different franchises when he did it last year? But he was awesome. He had his best year yardage wise, and not catches or touchdowns, but for yardage, he was just always like 1,100 yard type of guy. He got 1,250 last year, obviously extra game and stuff, but he did miss 2. So that kind of sucks when he had a huge game that got you into the championship and then was not there for the championship. I don't know. I still think he's a good receiver that people aren't going to value as maybe highly as they should. So for that reason, like, he's a potential buy, as like you need a wide receiver too. I think Amari Cooper can do that for you. He's listed as wide receiver 35. I understand he'll be 30, but I still think you can get a good year from him. I'll take like one good year of Amari Cooper than, like a Romeo Doubs or Josh Downs or something like that. So where are you at with Amari Cooper? Worried about the age of being 30?
No, not really. Like, I like definitely like you. I think what you said is spot on as far as I think he can give you another good year, and like I think Dobbs is like the perfect kind of like trade. Like, if you have Dobbs and you can get Amari Cooper for it, it's like, I think the person who has Cooper is like, oh, I'm getting out and like I'm trading away, like, or I'm getting a really young player. It's like, I don't think Dobbs is ever going to be anything like what Amari Cooper will give you, at least not consistently. Like, I think he's going to be the obvious number 1 dude on the team. We've seen some, like, unfortunately, we haven't seen a ton of them playing together, but we've seen some chemistry with them, him and Deshaun Watson. So, yeah, I think he's like a perfect older wide receiver to kind of target, who you can probably get pretty cheap.
Yeah, I agree there. So people always underrate him, they do. So I still think he will be Deshaun Watson's guy as well. So I think you're just looking at his game log. He had looks like he had a couple good games in there with Watson, but obviously his 46 points in week 16. That's like 25% of his total, or 20% of his total, or something. So that is a little overinflated. But he's always been kind of that type of receiver, kind of a little bit more of a boom bust guy. So yeah, I think you can get one more really good wide receiver 2 year out of him. Elijah Moore, it's probably not going to happen. Like, I was really high on him going to Cleveland. Thought he was going to do well. Liked him kind of coming out of college. He had that really good stretch there in his first year where people are like, all right, here comes like Elijah Moore season. Yeah, it was like weeks 8 to 13. I'm kind of curious to see where he was in terms of the rankings at that time. I'm going to check that out. But it just doesn't seem like he had 100 targets last year. And you look at the list of guys who got 100 targets, I'm just kind of quickly looking through, and they all kind of did something. Like Marquise Brown is maybe one you can say was like a disappointment, but like just quickly looking through, it's like all these guys were good players that got 100 targets fantasy-wise. He just did nothing with it. So it's unfortunate. Do you think he's ever going to pan out, or is it just it's not going to work out for Elijah Moore, who's again pretty highly valued there. Looks like he got up to like wide receiver 16, 17 when he started to go off that year. So where are you at with Elijah Moore?
Yeah, I think odds are like it's not going to pan out with him, but I think the couple of things that he has kind of going in his favor are, again, it's the theme of the Browns, right? It's like, well, what's going to happen when Watson's there, kind of a thing, I do agree with you. He didn't do much with his targets this season. I think it's funny when you mentioned we were kind of excited when he went to the Browns and stuff. It's because he was coming from the Jets. So it's like, we're always excited when people leave the Jets, basically, because it's like, oh, they can only be better, right? I think the odds of him doing anything is probably slim, but he is very young. He's almost 24, but it's just funny because when you look at him on Sleeper, it says he's 23. I had to look at well, what's his birthday, kind of a thing. So he will be 24 soon. But that's still pretty young for a guy who's played 3 years, it's not extremely young or anything, but it's still kind of all right. I think he's a fine, you could probably get him for, I'm trying to see what are they valuing him at.
Saw a late second in there. I don't know if that was 2026 late second.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't even know if I do that though, to be honest.
No, I don't think so. I think if you're buying Elijah Moore, you're buying him extremely cheap. Maybe a couple of 4th round picks or something like that cheap, so yeah, do that with what you will.
I
don't think that's the phrase, but you know what I'm saying.
I'm just looking at every player who had 100 targets last year and their fantasy total. I just pulled it up with Pro Football Reference stat head, and so there's 42 players that had 100 targets or more.
I'm going to guess he was 38
in terms of fantasy points. He was last.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Everyone had over 100 fantasy points or more, except for Marquise Brown and Elijah Moore. What about Marquise Brown missed 3 games? Elijah Moore played every game. So, yeah, 73.1 PPR points last year with 100 targets. So that's not good at all. That's 30, basically 30 less than Trey McBride, who's 3rd to last on that list. And he had a stretch where Zach Ertz was there. So not good. Cedric Tillman's probably the only other guy really worth potentially stashing. Again, this team's not really in a position. Maybe they do bring in a weapon or draft a weapon, but also that's not a given considering the cap space and draft picks. So he was a 3rd round pick, I believe, maybe 4th. I think he was 3rd. I kind of liked him, at Tennessee more than Jalen Hyatt. So he's interesting. He's 6'3", 215. He has good size. He could develop into something. I think he's definitely worth a hold if he's going to go into the year as the wide receiver 3 or 2 potentially. And I don't think there's anyone else to talk about unless you want to say something on anyone, including Tillman.
No, I think what you said about Tillman is kind of you kind of have to throw out his rookie year because he's not even playing with the guy who he's going to play with. He didn't really start very much when Watson was there, which I know we've kind of talked about as far as we've been spoiled with wide receivers. It's well, why aren't they just awesome right off the bat, kind of a thing, He was an early, I was going to say day 2, but that's not right. Round 3 guy.
It's day 2.
And yeah, I know, but it's not early day 2.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. He earned himself some playing time. Maybe I'm just kind of seeing his snap percentage and stuff. So it's funny because you can get him cheaper than Elijah Moore. So, which I think, I don't think his value really changed very much. It probably dropped a bit probably be looking at that, but I didn't. Yeah,
Probably not.
Yeah, I definitely didn't go up. So
yeah,
but,
and then Dave. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. You can finish.
No, that's it. I was gonna say,
okay.
And
yeah, David Bell. I mean, is another guy.
Which is not true.
David Bell's another receiver that maybe people want to talk about, but I don't really want to talk about him. I think he's a roster clogger. But yeah, David Njoku is probably who you're talking about. Had an awesome last 10 weeks of this. It was a significant. It was basically like the entire season except for the first 5 or 6 weeks. I think he was just awesome. One potential. He was a difference maker at the tight end position. Finally, like we knew this guy. The guy, if you ever just see him without like his shirt on or something, like the guy's freaking. He's just one of those like Greek god built players, and it's like, why isn't this guy better? First round pick. He's like Noah Fant, like ridiculously athletic, and that's why I'm still have hope for Noah Fant. He'll have a breakout year, but what is it? Year 7 breakout for Njoku. So not what we expected, but yeah, 80 catches, 882 yards, 6 touchdowns, and that was really I remember I dropped him in a league because he wasn't doing anything. I think we said that on the show, like you could drop him because he kind of started off the year. Yeah, he started off the year really not doing anything the first 5 weeks. He was awesome. Now, the problem is, so he's ranked as tight end 7, but I don't think you can get tight end 7 value in a trade from him because I'm looking at what that is. That's essentially the 202 in this year's draft. I don't think anyone's given that up for Njoku. I saw like a 2026 first. If I get any first from Njoku, I'll definitely trade it. 25, 26. Obviously 24. I still don't even think that will happen though. So he's kind of a weird one. Like you're not going to get what the tight end 7 value, but that's where he's valued at. Njoku, do you think he can do it again? Do you think people are just worried because like he didn't do well with Deshaun Watson? Is that what people are kind of hesitant about?
I'm sure that's a lot of it. Like you said, it's it's his 7th year in the league. Granted, tight ends do take a little bit longer to get going, but that's too long, like that's not what's happened. Yeah. He's still he's going to be 28 going into the next the 2024 season, which is pretty good, for a tight end. I totally agree with you. Where it's like I don't think you can get tight end 7 value. Like he did have that big jump last year. I definitely would take an early second for him, especially if he was my tight end 2. But I'm kind of fine with him being my tight end 2. Also, I think the worries are kind of what you said. He wasn't very good with Watson, but Watson wasn't really that good when he was there. When he was playing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think he is a tricky one. And I know you like him as a player too, where you're like, why won't he do it? And then he did. Yeah,
definitely. It's just athletic guy. It's like, oh, maybe if we give this guy the ball, he will do well, and that's what happened.
I mean, we just went over all the pass catchers on this team. It's like he could easily be the number 2 guy on this team, sure. Which is what you want out of your tight end. You want him to be first or second on the team in targets, which he could definitely do.
Yep.
So yeah.
I'm fine with him as my tight end 1 heading into the year. I'm fine with obviously getting any first for him for the 2024 draft. I'll take anything from the 205 or 6 upwards, maybe even a little bit later. When you start talking about random seconds, if I can bank on a 2025 second and I can project this team's going to be bad, I'd probably take it. But if it's completely random second, I probably just won't take it. I'll just roll with Njoku, who could be a difference maker at the position. So, and there's no one else to talk about for tight end. So, anything else on the Cleveland Browns?
Nope.
All right. Well, we're going to finish up there. We will be back with the Cowboys. Disappointing end to the year for them. Yeah. Fun team to talk about, though.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, at this point, they got to be expecting that shit. Like
this year did feel different. We'll talk about it, but it did feel different for the Cowboys. Like, at least from my point of view, it did. So,
all right.
But anyways, we'll be back with the Cowboys. As always, like and subscribe. We'll catch you guys then.